Let me make the view a little bigger. Oh, it's good. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Now, person-centered planning, ladies and gentlemen, there's an 18-hour course. So we're just going into the basic process of person-centered planning. As I said, there's an 18-hour course. I've taken the course. It's really wonderful. Okay. I recommend the course to everyone. Okay. And so let's look at what it is. And person-centered planning is nationwide. Okay. And it grew out of an essential lifestyle planning. For over 30 years, the learning community for person-centered practices. Let me say that again. The learning community for person-centered practices, which is TLCPCP, skills and tools for discovery and description have been developed and redefined and refined. The purpose of person-centered planning is to help the people we support discover what a meaningful life looks like for them and to describe the support they need to achieve that life. And at the center of the person-centered plan is the individual. And then the other members of their circle of support are around them. And other members of the circle of support could be a neighbor, could be their Aunt Frida, could be their Uncle Frank, it can be their cousin Susan. It can be anyone who's part of that individual's family, individual's friends. They're day program people. You know, if they go to a day program, they have a whole set of people that we know nothing about. That's part of their circle of support as well, and part of their person-centered plan. Okay? So the TLCPCP, and for just easy reference, I'm just going to call it the T, okay? Uses a set of skills and tools based on the foundational concepts of important to and important for, okay? We believe that understanding what constitute happiness for a person and the connection between happiness and health and safety gives a person a solid place to start in understanding what they want their lives to look like. From there, we can help them describe the support they need and the best way to provide it. All this helps the person move toward a life they desire. Just like I'm going to be sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name. I apologize. When you talked about the young lady who wants to be healthy, be more in shape, but she's drinking sodas, that situation would come here and would be addressed in person-centered. And what's good about the person-centered plan, the individual has it. The individual gets a copy. The individual can refer it. And it's much better for the individual and for the plan to succeed if the individual is of higher functioning cognitively. Because your individuals that are severe and profound, it's more of what's important for them, what's best for them. They don't have that ability to give the input on what's important for them. And we'll go over the three important forms for this person-centered planning. We're going to look at those forms. Okay. All right. So, so when we get to the forms, you'll understand the plan better. Okay. How it works. We begin by helping the person we are planning to identify the people in their lives who know and love them the best. They invite those people to participate in the planning process. So it's an actual meeting. And if they can't come to the meeting, you give them a form. And your form you have at the meeting so that you can say, well, cousin Susan said this, this, and this. This is her form. This is what she says. Okay. The person and the people that they invite are considered content experts because they know the person, right? They provide the information used to build the person-centered description. We refer to the facilitator of the experience as the process expert. So you have people, their friends, families, um, therapists might have a form, the day program director might have a form, the service coordinator may have a form if she can't make it. Anyone who can't make it to this meeting has a form, okay? They're the content experts, and the person running the meeting is the process expert, okay? And a person-centered training facilitator is trained and experienced in using the T skills and tools to have a pleasant, productive conversations with the content experts, right? The conversations are designed to discover what is important to the person. It's important to that young lady to have a soda, to have several sodas, okay, in a day, okay? What's important for the person? Well, it's important for that person to make sure they're drinking water. Because if they're not drinking water, that soda is going to mess up their kidneys, right? That's one of the health effects. That soda is going to bring on weight, okay? Weight gain, okay? What is the connection and balance between the important two and the important four? What's that balance, right? What does a meaningful life look like for the person? Okay. What supports the person needs to have a good balance between important two and important four? And this helps them get and stay on a trajectory that moves them toward a life they desire, right? They want to be healthy. That's their desire. So the important four helps them get to that trajectory, helps them get to that life they desire, to be healthy. Okay. Positive control for the person. In addition to ensuring these planning conversations are pleasant and productive, the facilitator is also charged with ensuring that the person whom we're planning maintains positive control throughout the experience. Because that person is there. They've chosen the people they want to come to the meeting. They choose the people. They set the time for the meeting. Okay. And again, if someone can't come to that meeting, you give them a form to complete. Okay. So that form represents them at the meeting. Okay. Discovery skills and tools. A trained PCT facilitator may use some or all of the following skills and tools to discover and planning. Like and admire, that's a form. Likes and dislikes. Good day, bad day, we're going to see that form. Reputation analysis. Matching. Support, stay safe. Supports for happiness, right? What makes me happy may not make me safe. Right? Right? What makes me happy may not make me safe. Okay? Routines and rituals. Working, not working. 4+1. The donut sort or learning logs. Okay? PT facilitators may also use planning tools and strategies developed and refined by other professionals. No matter what skills and tools are used, a skilled PCT facilitator knows their primary responsibility is to create a rich planning experience by facilitating pleasant and productive conversations that keep the person at the center with positive control over the process. Okay? Developing the plan. Because you take all of these forms, the good day, bad day, the important to, the one-page profile, the like and admire, you take all of these papers and you put them into the plan. Okay? So the PC facilitator uses all of the information they've learned about the person to draft a person-centered description. The person can use their PCD to communicate with support teams, providers, families, friends to help ensure they receive the best support. Now, one of these forms, the one-page profile, has really been used with doctors because it gives a snapshot of the individual. And you'll see the form. So you'll have an opportunity to say, oh, yeah. And one of my colleagues, when I was at being an agency director, and I was through Westside Regional. That's all the agencies that I worked through were through Westside Regional. One of the service coordinators at Westside told me he uses the one-page profile for him when he goes to a new doctor. He gives it to them. So they know about him in a snapshot. Because sometimes when we get to a doctor, we forget things. But the one-page profile is there as a reminder. Okay? The individual will lead the person-centered planning process where possible. The process should provide necessary information and support to ensure the individual directs the process to the maximum extent possible and is enabled to make informed choices and decisions. And remember, we always want them to make an informed choice. You know, you want to drink the soda, got it. However, remember, that's going to mess up your kidneys. Remember, that's going to make you gain weight. Remember, that's not always healthy. You know, water is a better resource. And I'm old school. I don't do bottled water. I personally drink water out of the tap. I'm old school. So that for me works for me. Okay. So bringing other choices into the situation allows them to have an informed choice to make an informed decision. Okay. The individual's representative should have a participatory role as needed and as defined by the individual, unless state law confers decision-making authority to the legal representative. That's when the person is conserved. Okay. All references to the individual include the role of the individual's representative. So you're going to say Aunt Susan said this, Cousin Margaret said that. Okay. And the day program director told us in a form this, this, and this. You're going to identify who said what. Okay. The planning process should only include people chosen by the individual. Okay. The person-centered planning process should be characterized by the following. It's timely and it occurs at times and locations convenient to the individual. It reflects cultural considerations of the individuals. It is conducted by providing information in plain language and that in a manner that is accessible to individuals with disabilities and other persons who are limited English proficient. So there should be no abbreviations. There shouldn't be these big college words that we sometimes use in our field. You know, it should be plain English that the individual understands and that someone who's limited in English can understand. Okay? Conflict resolution. The person-centered planning process should include strategies for solving conflicts or disagreements within the process, including clear conflict of interest guidelines for all planning participants. Okay, so there shouldn't be a conflict of interest. It shouldn't be that I'm his day program representative and I'm only going to say good things about the day program. And if someone says something bad or that I perceive as bad, I'm going to object. Okay. It should be conflict of interest guidelines should be posted. Okay. Conflict of interest. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Providers of home community-based services, that's HCBS, and everyone falls under HCBS at the regional center. For the individual or those who have an interest in or are employed by a provider of HCBS for the individual must not provide case management or develop a person-centered plan. Okay? Okay. Exceptions to this will only be granted when the state demonstrates that the only willing and qualified entity to provide case management or develop person-centered service plans in a geographic area also includes HCBS. Okay. In those cases, the state must devise conflict of interest protections, including separation of entity and provider functions within provider entities, which must be provided by the Centers for Medicaid Services. Individuals must also be provided with clear, accessible, alternative dispute resolution process. Okay. And again, that's only for conflict of interest. Okay. All right. The planning process. Now, before I go on, are there any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Conflict of interest. And conflict of interest would not include any of you. Let's be clear about that, okay? Conflict resolution, developing the plan, discovery skills and tools, positive control for the person, how it works. Are there any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, or are you all waiting just to see the form? Okay. All right. No questions,
Oh,
Nellie? No one in the
no questions in the chat either.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So the planning process must, one, offer informed choices to the individual regarding the services and supports they receive and from whom. Now, this is really contingent on the individual because the greater behavioral challenges the individual has, the fewer choices they're going to have, the fewer informed choices, because their behaviors are blocking a lot of options, right? Okay. Record the alternative home and community-based settings that were considered by the individual. Include a method for the individual to request updates to the plan as needed. And the person-centered service plan must reflect the services and supports that are important for the individual to meet the needs identified through an assessment of functional needs, as well as what is important to the individual about preferences for the delivery of such services and support. The written plan must reflect the setting in which the individual resides, is chosen by the individual. Okay. The state must ensure, and remember, this is a federal guideline. Okay, so every state has it. And like I said, California was one of the last states to go with this home and community-based services because California is a very complex state because it gives so many resources to individuals. If you're a developmentally and or intellectually disabled person, do not come to North Carolina. I'm telling you now, don't come to North Carolina. The services are far and in between. There's no regional center. And Easter Seals here in Northern California sees autism kids, which is crazy because that's not what Easter Seals does. They don't necessarily do autism unless it's combined with the diagnosis is the individual has more than one diagnosis. Okay, but individuals who are strictly autism, they go to Easter Seals activities because Easter Seals is a really big provider here. The providers here in North Carolina are scarce. Okay. The state must ensure that the setting chosen by the individual is integrated into and the supports full access of individuals receiving Medicaid, HCBS to the greater community. So the services have to be integrated. And again, this is what the state has to do, not you as an agency, not you as a SLS instructor, okay? Opportunities to seek employment and work in competitive integrated settings. engage in community life, control personal resources, and receive services in the community to the same degree of access as individuals not receiving Medicaid HCBS. The state has to ensure that, okay? Now, the person-centered plan must reflect on the individual's strengths and preferences, reflect on clinical and support needs as identified through an assessment of functional needs, include individually identified goals and desired outcomes, reflect risk factors and measures in place to minimize them, including individualized backup plans when needed, reflect on the services and supports paid and unpaid that will assist the individual to achieve identified goals, and providers of those supports and services, including natural supports. And natural supports, ladies and gentlemen, and unpaid people could be family. Family members are a natural support. Okay, whether it's the mom, dad, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, cousins, they're a natural support. Okay, and they're unpaid. Okay, natural, and here's the definition: natural supports are unpaid people who voluntarily assist and support the individual instead of 1915C HCBS waiver services and supports. Okay, so your IHSS worker is not a natural support. They are a paid person. Okay. Include those services of the support or control of which the individual elects to self-direct. Okay. And that's more with individuals who are of higher functioning, intellectual functioning. Okay. Prevent the provision of unnecessary or inappropriate services and supports. The understandable to the individual receiving services and supports, and the individual's important in supporting her or him. And at a minimum, for the written plan to be understandable, it must be written in plain language and in a manner that is accessible to individuals with disabilities and persons who are limited English proficient. Okay? So we've got this plan. Now we need to monitor it, we need to finalize it, and we need to distribute. Okay? So we want to identify the individual and or entity responsible for monitoring the plan. Okay? Be finalized and agreed to with the informed consent of the individual in writing and signed by all of the individuals and providers responsible for its implementation. So everyone who was part of the process, even the people that sent in the forms, sign it, okay, to be responsible for its implementation and be distributed to the individual and other people involved in the plan. Okay, now, modifications. Any modifications of these conditions must be supported by a specific assessed need and justified in the person-centered service plan. The following requirements must be documented in the person-centered service plan. Identify a specific and individualized assessed need. Document the positive interventions and support used for any modification to the person-centered service plan. Include a clear description of the condition that is directly proportionate to the specific assessed need. Include a regular collection and review of data to measure the ongoing effectiveness of the modification. Include established time limits for periodic reviews to determine if the modification is still necessary or can we terminate it, right? Include informed consent of the individual and include an assurance that interventions and support will cause no harm to the individual. Okay, those factors have to be in when you do a modification. Okay, now we want to review. The person-centered service plan must be reviewed and revised upon reassessment of functional need at least every 12 months. When the individual's circumstances or needs change significantly or at the request of the individual. So we have to do it at least once a year, usually at the annual IPP meeting, or when the individual's circumstances or needs change. And this is usually something that, for an example, they have a stroke. And now their health is affected, their safety is affected by this stroke because it was debilitating. Their whole right side is messed up. So now we have to modify the existing plan because now we have to count in and include that whole paralysis of the right side. Okay. And then there's continuous learning, ladies and gentlemen. Person-centered descriptions are not a one and done thing. The person and the people who support them should regularly use PCT skills to continue learning and sharing their learning. This increases the likelihood that the person is supported in a way that keeps them on a trajectory toward a life they value. Okay? So I know I've said a lot. And before we go to the forms, are there any questions on what your thoughts, any comments on person-centered? Okay, none? Okay, so one of the forms they talked about is good day, bad day. Now, I'm going to make my Zoom smaller so you can see the form in its entirety. No, I don't want 2 pages, 1 page. Okay, here we go. Good day, bad day. Can everyone see? So what we do here, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring this cloud down. Okay. What we do here is we talk about and you write down what does a good day look like for the person? What's a good day? What does a bad day look like for a person? What are some triggers that can make a bad day? Okay. So one of my individuals on a good day, she said she gets her cup of coffee with breakfast. She gets her cup of coffee. If she's got a cup of coffee, she knows it's going to be a good day. Another one of my individuals said on a bad day, if it's raining, that might be a bad day because they can't really wear what they want to wear on a bad day. And they have to carry an umbrella. And they hate carrying umbrellas. Okay? Now, can we change it's raining or not? No, we can't change it, but we can identify it and we can talk about the behavior, right? Hey, Margaret, you know it's going to be a bad day today for you, possibly because it's raining. But let's turn that around, okay? Let's turn that around, Margaret. How can we turn it around? Yes, you have to take the umbrella, but remember, you're only using the umbrella from the front door to the car. After that, you can put the umbrella away. You don't need it in the car. Okay. And so again, ladies and gentlemen, it's talking to your individuals, acknowledging the behavior and talking through it, giving them options and choices, letting them see that having the umbrella all day doesn't mean you're carrying it around open all day. You just have to have it. Will it fit in a pocket? Will it fit in their backpack so they don't have to physically carry it? Okay. So look at all the options to change a bad day into a good day. Okay. And at the question at the bottom, what will it take to have more good days and fewer bad days? So you pose that question to the group. What will it take? Because unfortunately, none of us here can control the weather. None of us. Okay. So how do we make those things that are bad day items? How do we either figure out a way to talk through them and eliminate them as being seen as bad day? Or is there something in there that we can physically change to turn it from a bad day to a good day? Okay. All right. Any thoughts or questions on good day, bad day? Okay. Has anyone seen these forms before? Raise your hand, please, if you've seen these forms. No one's seen these forms before.
I've seen
It-
these before.
you have, Nellie?
I
Okay, you have?
have.
Okay, good, 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 good. Okay, so only you. Okay, all right. Now,
No, I'm sure.
others don't want to speak up. Okay,
Uh-huh.
okay, one page profile. Okay, now this page really encompasses a lot of other forms. Okay, so let's look at that. And I'm going to make my page just a little bit bigger so we can see. Oh, it went to 75. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the one page profile. Okay, what people like and admire about Fred. Now, this is Fred's one page profile. We'd have his name up at the top, right? So, what people like and admire about Fred? Well, for me, Fred likes my disco music. I'm a disco girl and I love disco music. So, that's what I like about Fred. Okay. Eduardo, you may like that Fred likes to dance. He likes to move and dance, right? Who's there? I've said Lawanda, I've said your name. Uh, ooh, Dora, haven't I've said your name, but you had a question. Dora might say she likes how Fred dresses. He always looks nice, his clothes always match. He's a snappy dresser. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. When you put a picture of your individual right here, their face lights up because that's them. And this is their page, their picture, their stuff. They love being on print. They love having their picture taken. Okay? Now, here's what is important too. So, what is important to Fred? Well, what's important to Fred? He needs his radio because that's how he listens to his music. That's important to Fred, right? It's important to Fred to buy a new shirt every 3 months because he likes his wardrobe changed because Dora mentioned that. Dora mentioned that he's a snappy dresser and Fred likes to keep his things current and active, right? And what's important to Fred is that he likes to dance, so his balance and coordination is important to Fred, right? Right? And other things could be important to Fred, right? It might be important to Fred. And again, excuse me, important to Fred, because this is Fred's perspective. This is Fred's perspective on what's important to him. So it may be important to him to eat a healthy diet because he wants to keep moving. Okay. Now, how to best support Fred? How to best support Fred? Okay. So to best support Fred, you want to, number one, keep music because Fred likes music. The Commodores is his favorite group, right? Earth, Wind, and Fire is up there too, right? So you want to keep music around. And Fred, he likes to also play games and cards. So it's best to keep games active for Fred, right? He likes all those things. Fred likes to talk about when he used to go to the disco when he was young, right? Because Fred's in his 60s. So Fred used to go to the discos when he was younger. So you young folks may not know what a disco is, but it was an experience you went to, right? And Fred can tell you all about it. So if you have a conversation with Fred and tell me about a disco, that's the best way to support him. That's the best way. Number one, it'll keep his behaviors down because you got him talking. And you got him talking about an experience that he enjoyed, right? And the best way to support Fred is to help keep him moving, right? And then what's a good match for Fred? So characteristics need to be present or absent. And the good match for Fred is what staff is good for Fred. So a staff who doesn't like learning, a staff who can't talk in English or has very limited English is not going to be a good match for Fred, because Fred is going to want to talk about the disco. And he may ask you, what's your favorite music? And you can say salsa, you can say hip hop, you can say ballroom, and then you talk about the different things and what's similar and what's not. Another characteristic may be someone who's of the same age as Fred and say, you know what, Fred? Yeah, I used to go to Dylan's in Westwood. And that was a disco. Dylan's in Westwood. The Red Onion was a disco in LA. So because I have those shared experiences, Fred and I will get along. We'll get along because I can talk to him about the disco. And what happened in the disco? What was the craziest thing you saw in the disco? So those things and having those common interests, ladies and gentlemen, or asking questions and talking with your individuals will eventually build rapport. And it will also build respect that your individual will have for you. And that's critical, is your individual having a rapport and a relationship with you, and then having respect for you. And with you asking questions and being interested in your individual, that's going to empower the individual and have the individual say, oh, they like me. They're concerned about me. And it's going to empower them to feel valued and to be a person. And isn't that all we want? We all want that, to feel valued, to be a person, to be seen as a person. Okay, so any questions, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the next one? Any questions on the one-page profile? Any questions? Okay, have any of you
No, Joy,
seen?
there weren't any questions, but Monsif also did mention he has seen these forms before.
Thank you,
Mhm.
sir. Now, that's what I was going to ask. So no one's seen the one-page profile besides the two of you. Okay, I have to stop sharing this screen because the important to form and the important for form, I could not change it through Adobe. So give me one moment, please, and I'll get that important to form for you. And then I'll share my screen. Now, this is the important to, important for form that we've been talking about all through this whole training. Now, let me minimize my screen a little bit so you can see the whole form. So it looks like this. The person's holding the form up, and one of them is important to, and the other one is important for. And this is critical because the individual has all of their wants and desires, right? It's important for me to have a Coke every day. It's important for me to have 4 Cokes every day. It's important, right? It's important for me to walk to McDonald's and order a Big Mac every day. It's important, right? Okay. Now, the important for part is usually where staff and other members of their circle of support come in and say, yes, I can see that it's important to you to have that, but it's important for you to look at how much you take because your health. That, in the last 3 months, when you went to the doctor, you weighed 160 pounds and now you weigh 200. So in 3 months, and I'm being excessive, I know in my example, but in the last 3 months, you've gained 40 pounds. So is that really good for you? And do you want to continue? What would you like to do? And you're bringing out the realities of their situation, and you're not doing it in a derogatory or demeaning way. You're just going to state the fact. You're just going to state the fact. And everyone knows the individual's positive or negative behaviors. Everybody knows. And the person-centered plan is meant to be positive. However, you do have to list the risks that are involved and the risks that the individual participates in or has or displays. Okay? So this is the important 2 and important 4, and you would make a list of things. And sometimes, depending on the individual, the important 4 is not really there because, they don't have a lot of issues. So it's important for them to stay safe. It's important for them to stay healthy. And that may be all, and it's important for them to, listen to their disco music twice a day, once a day, every week, on the weekends. It's important for them to call mom every Saturday. You list those things that are important for the individual. Okay? And if your individual does not have the cognitive ability to really participate, then you as the SLS agency need to advocate for your individual. So you may have to say what's important to them because you know your individual best. So it's important for Margaret to have her morning cup of coffee. It's important for Margaret to touch her dad's picture on the wall every morning before she leaves because her dad died 2 years ago. It's important for her to kiss her mom's picture because she misses her mom. Her mom moved to North Carolina or whatever. Okay? So those kinds of things you want to include in the plan. And you want to make sure that your individual, whether they can say it or not, be heard in what's important to them. Okay? All right. So that ends my training. Does anyone have any questions? Let's talk about the important 2, the important 4 form first. Does anyone have any questions on that? No? Okay. Does anyone have any questions on anything in person-centered planning then? No? All right. We're done. Okay? So have a great weekend. I will see you Sunday.